Hey guys, tonight we're drifting into one of the strangest, most beautiful engineering feats of the ancient world. The Aztec chinampas floating gardens that weren't exactly floating, weren't exactly gardens, and definitely weren't simple. You'll smell wet soil and crushed flowers. You'll hear paddle strokes echoing over glassy water. You'll see canals cutting the morning mist like veins in a leaf. And somewhere in the background of this peaceful scene, you'll remember that this lush green maze was also built to feed a blood-soaked empire. You probably won't survive this, by the way. Between the sacrificial altars, crocodile-infested canals, and imperial tax collectors with obsidian blades, ancient Tenochtitlan wasn't exactly a wellness retreat. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to know, where are you listening from and what time is it where you are now? Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of Lake Texcoco, and the sun is just starting to yawn behind the distant hills. The water before you is silver and flat, disturbed only by the lazy glide of a heron's wingtip. Everything smells alive. A blend of damp reeds, wood smoke, crushed flowers, and if you breathe deeper, something faintly sour. Compost, maybe? No, not quite. It's the scent of a city that farms in the middle of a lake. A canoe slips past its pilot kneeling low with a paddle as wide as your thigh. The man nods at you. He's wearing a cloak the color of maize husk, and his hands look like they've never stopped working. You step into a boat tethered loosely to a crooked wooden post. A young boy unties it for you and vanishes before you can thank him. Your guide today is the water itself, or maybe just the whisper of oars somewhere in the morning mist. Tenochtitlan, capital of the Mexica, better known as the Aztecs, is slowly revealing itself as you drift forward. And here's the kicker, it's not even on land. The city rises out of the lake like a hallucination. Historians still argue whether the city's exact founding was due to prophecy strategy or pure luck. But what's undeniable is this: they built a city on a lake that should have swallowed them, and instead they made it bloom. This is where it gets weird. Those long green plots on either side of the canal, they're not islands, not naturally at least. You squint and realize the garden beds are suspiciously regular, long, thin rectangles of green hemmed in by stakes and crisscrossed by rows of vegetables. They don't float, they're anchored, built from the lake bed up like giant earthy rafts pinned into place. A man waves you over and helps tie your boat to a post on one of the chinampas. He gestures for you to walk gently. The ground gives slightly underfoot, springy and damp like firm moss. You're standing on a human-made miracle, one shovel at a time. Birdsong crackles from the reeds. Somewhere nearby, someone strikes a copper bell to wake the workers. You've arrived just as the garden comes to life. Quirky fact: the Aztecs didn't just use these gardens to grow crops. They used them to grow flowers for the gods. Marigolds, dahlias, and periwinkles would be plucked at sunrise and carried across the lake for rituals. Some priests claimed certain flowers could only grow if whispered to correctly. One priest even trained parrots to recite chants near the seedlings. Possibly true, definitely adorable. A teenage girl kneels beside a tiny patch of amaranth. She hums as she thins the seedlings with surprising gentleness. You watch her work and realize she's performing agriculture like it's embroidery. And in some sense it is. Your gaze lifts, and in the distance, the temple pyramids rise above the mist like jagged teeth. A reminder this isn't just some tranquil Eden. This is the breadbasket of an empire that demanded tribute, sacrificed hearts, and believed the sun would die without daily bribes of blood and corn. Still, in this early hour, it's hard not to feel peaceful. You crouch beside the canal and dip your fingers into the water. It's cool, smooth, almost syrupy with algae. Tiny fish dart away. Somewhere nearby, a child's laughter bounces off the water. Maybe there's hope here too. The man beside you, the farmer, looks over and says something in Nahuatl. You don't understand the words, but the meaning is clear. He taps the earth points to the water, then to the sky. Todo, he says, switching briefly to Spanish. Everything. We live from this. You nod. You believe him. And as the mist finally begins to burn away, revealing more canals, more boats, more human figures tending the soft geometry of a lake that feeds the world, you realize you've only just stepped into the fringe of one of history's most elegant illusions. A garden that floats but never drifts. You push off again, drifting farther along a canal that now seems to curve with intent, not chance. The water narrows in places, bordered by rushes and flowering vines before opening into wider lanes like sudden plazas of liquid glass. You're beginning to notice the system here, not just a garden, but a grand design. It's like sailing through a brain's neural network if that brain also grew chili peppers and sunflowers. Lake Texcoco sprawls around you, a brackish, shallow basin nestled in the Valley of Mexico. But here at the city's heart, everything seems engineered. Canals run like roads, raised garden beds jut out in elegant precision. From above, historians suggest the city must have looked like a green mosaic inlaid with silver threads. Some say Venice, but the Aztecs did it without marble or gondoliers. Just mud patience and brilliance. A heron startles upward, nearby wings slicing the silence. As it vanishes into the pale sky, your boat coasts beside another chinampa, this one alive with a buzzing rhythm of tools and voices. Workers in loose tunics pass baskets, hand to hand, filled with squashes, shaped like lanterns, and tomatoes red as rubbed coral. One man pauses to wave you over. He's older, stoop-shouldered, but proud, his hair tied back with a cloth dyed blue. He gestures with his chin for you to come ashore, then slowly begins to explain how all this floats. Except again it doesn't. He kicks his heel against the ground. Thud. No es magia, he says with a crooked smile. It's mud. You raise an eyebrow. He grins wider. A lot of mud. And he's right. Chinampas begin with nothing but a shallow section of lake and a dangerous amount of free time. First builders drive wooden stakes deep into the lake bed to form a rectangle often 30 meters long, sometimes over 90. Then the slow layering begins. Lake bed, muck, river, silt reeds, compost, more muck, over and over. The result, a raised bed that rises just above the waterline but is packed with nutrients and very much tethered to the earth beneath it. You crouch and poke a finger into the soil. It's cool, springy, black as night. There's something alive in it, worms probably, or tiny microbes plotting your downfall. But it smells rich, generous. The man shows you a basket of debris scooped from the canal bottom. Algae, rotting leaves, fine silt that slips between his fingers like silk. This is gold, he mutters. It feeds the corn better than blood. A pause. Well, most days, historians still argue whether chinampas originated with the Aztecs or whether they inherited and scaled an older system used by the Xochimilco people, one of the valley's earlier cultures. Either way, the Mexica took the idea and cranked it to 11. At its peak, the system covered up to 9,000 hectares. That's over 20,000 football fields if you're keeping score. And the canals between them, transportation highways. Farmers, priests, merchants, they all move by canoe. Your boatman from earlier reappears in the distance, stacking baskets of squash with the care of a museum archivist. One wrong jostle and plop, there goes dinner. You're shown a hand-drawn map scratched onto a clay tablet. It's rough but elegant, like a jazz solo in dirt. You can make out the grid of chinampas, each labeled with glyphs: a flower, a snake, a jaguar paw. Land ownership, you're told, was both communal and tracked rigorously. Some plots were family-run, others were state-controlled. Priests even blessed new plots with rituals involving incense song and the strategic placement of frog bones. That's not a joke. You're offered a mug of something warm, a toll, a corn-based drink, thick enough to eat with a spoon. It smells like roasted grain and burnt sugar. You sip. It clings to your tongue, comforting strange. The older man nods approvingly. This too comes from the water. He points to the maize field behind him. And from her, you turn to see a woman tending plants beneath a low trellis. She's humming a song you don't recognize, rhythmically tapping the earth with a flat wooden blade. The plants around her are in rows, neat but never rigid. Each bed seems sculpted to let water and wind pass gently, not fight. You step aside as a group of children trot past carrying a squirming mass in a woven basket. One glances at you and grins. Tadpoles, he shouts triumphant. You blink. For what? For later, he calls unhelpfully. The boat waits again. The day's getting warmer. A dragonfly hovers beside your ear, then vanishes upstream. Before you leave, the farmer places a small seed in your hand. Save it, he says simply. You nod. He turns back to the garden, already forgotten you. The canal opens again, a corridor of mirrored sky, and you drift deeper into the green maze, half in awe, half in disbelief. It's so perfect you begin to wonder if the gardens are watching you back. You trail your hand along the water's edge as the boat glides forward, and the ripple makes a lazy zigzag under your fingers. Ahead, the chinampas stretch like infinite puzzle pieces, long, narrow islands hemmed by canals so straight they feel drawn with a ruler made of bone. But when your guide steers the boat toward one particular plot, there's a glimmer in his eye that hints this one is different. You disembark again. The ground here feels springier, but firm enough to walk without sinking. A young woman elbows deep in a shallow trench looks up with a sunburned smile. "Watch your step," she calls out. "This is where we make the magic." And then she grins because it's not magic. You kneel beside her and watch as she scoops a mixture of algae, chopped weeds, lake mud, and crushed reeds into a basket. It's steaming slightly. Hot compost, she explains. It cooks in the sun, makes the crops think they live forever. Here it is, the real secret of the chinampas. Not just the raised beds, but the never-ending cycle: dredge the canal, dump it on the bed, grow, harvest, repeat. It's farming as ritual, as rhythm, as religion. She spreads the compost around the base of a row of beans, which climb lazily up thin poles planted beside maize stalks. Ah yes, the classic milpa trio, corn, beans, and squash. You probably learned about it in grade school with illustrations that look like someone's refrigerator magnet collection. But here in the sticky heat of Lake Texcoco, it's a symphony. Corn shoots skyward, the beans spiral up the stalks like green rope, and squash vines sprawl at the bottom, shading the soil and locking in moisture. No irrigation system, no chemical fertilizer, just symbiosis perfected over generations. You hear buzzing. A swarm of bees, well, not quite bees, zips past your face. Tiny, silent, winged. The woman chuckles. Melipona, she says. Stingless honeymakers. Sacred to the Maya, admired by the Aztecs. Their honey was harvested drop by painstaking drop, often by priests who swore the bees responded better to prayer. Historians still debate whether this was an act of faith or a subtle form of pest control. Nearby, a man arrives with a bucket and dumps a heap of something brown and steaming onto the compost pile. You step back instinctively. The woman just laughs. Human waste, she says. It's cured, safe, mostly. You blink. Mostly, she shrugs. If not, you'll find out in about 12 hours. You make a mental note never to eat raw lettuce in this century. And then she adds more softly, "We don't waste anything here. Not a thing. It's true. Every banana peel, fish bone, and bit of wilted leaf goes back into the loop. Even animal dung, donkey, turkey, duck is collected, dried, and returned to the earth." The result, these plots don't rest. They produce year-round up to 7 harvests annually in some cases. 7. That's more than some modern farms. You stand and brush your hands clean, only to be handed a second basket. "You're helping now," the woman says, utterly serious. What follows is a blur of movement. You're weeding around tomato plants with a paddle-shaped blade. You're hauling soggy mulch from the water's edge. You're nearly swallowed by a sunflower patch that grows taller than a basketball hoop. And all around you, frogs, birds, butterflies, crickets, and something that definitely just hissed. You look up startled. The woman follows your gaze and rolls her eyes. "That's just chickle." A moment later, a small crocodile waddles from the reeds, eyes you like a disappointed aunt, and slides back into the canal. "Pet, you ask?" "Pest," she replies, "but he eats the rats, so we let him stay." Some Chinampa farmers swore by crocodile dung as a sunblock, an idea that no modern dermatologist will support, and yet, no sunburns. Coincidence. You pause under the shade of a willow tree, one of dozens planted at the corners of the plot. They're not just decorative. Their roots help hold the structure together, forming a living rebar for the soil. The farmers call them ahuihot, native willows with a thirst for swampy ground and an ability to shrug off storms. You rest your head against one of them and feel the bark cool against your cheek. The tree's been here longer than most people in this city. You wonder if it remembers every seed that's been planted nearby. As the sun climbs higher, the plot quiets. Workers disappear to the shade. Birds settle into the reeds. Even chickle vanishes beneath a curtain of lily pads. You, meanwhile, are covered in sweat soil and possibly ancient microbes that will awaken in your dreams. But for now, you sit cross-legged at the edge of a chinampa, dipping your toes in the canal, surrounded by a garden that lives not on land, not in water, but somehow between the two, a place neither fully here nor fully there. And still impossibly it grows. You wake up from a brief doze with a start, the kind that makes you question if you missed a whole century. But no, you're still on the chinampa, and the sun has simply shifted. Shadows are longer now. There's a fresh breeze dancing across the water, and the woman from before is gone, replaced by a new figure. He's wiry, shirtless, and humming something that sounds suspiciously like a lullaby for chili peppers. He's digging with a flat wooden tool, a kind of spade, but curved and worn smooth at the handle. With each scoop, he adds another layer to the bed. Mud reeds silt, scoop patch shift. You watch him work for several minutes before he even acknowledges you. You want to learn, he finally says, not looking up. You nod, then dig, and just like that, you're learning the choreography of chinampa making. Not the gentle weeding or poetic composting from earlier. This is the heavy work, the real work. And it's kind of amazing how something as peaceful as a floating garden begins with what feels like a day at a swamp-themed CrossFit class. First, the foundation. The wooden stakes, usually willow or alder, are driven into the shallow lake bed in a rectangle. You're shown how to space them with a rope knotted at regular intervals. Too far apart, he warns, and the soil slips. Too close, and you waste good wood. Next comes the layering, a mix of Limo Lake mud reeds like tool-decaying plant matter and waterlogged soil. It smells bold, like the inside of a frog's memoir. But as you help toss the goop into place, you see the brilliance it binds. Like cake batter made of the earth. 3 months, he says. Then plant. 3 months, he grins. Or 5 if you're lazy. Once the bed is built up above water level, crops are planted in tight rows, narrow enough for easy tending, wide enough to allow sunlight and air. Some are planted in anticipation like garlic or wild herbs. Others, like maize and beans, are started in seed beds on land and transplanted by canoe. Every plot, he says, gesturing around him, is a memory. My grandfather built that one. My wife tends the far one. My son drowned a chicken in that one. He points with his chin. We don't talk about that day. You laugh because it's funny, but also because this place feels deeply lived in. Not just agricultural, emotional, personal. Every inch is shaped by human hands and haunted by human footsteps. You notice the boundaries fascinating in their simplicity. Bundles of reeds are tied together and anchored at the corners. Between them, living willow trees are planted. Over time, their roots reinforce the edges, while their trunks act like posts. Some plots have low fences made of woven twigs. Others are open, letting ducks and children wander freely. You ask about erosion. He nods solemnly. You can't stop the lake from wanting it back. You can only keep reminding it who built it first. Quirky fact time. In some records, Aztec farmers sang to the lake at sunrise, asking it not to take their gardens overnight. And according to one 17th century friar, there were chinampa festivals where plots were blessed by dancers who threw flowers maize and even carved figurines into the canals. Historians still argue whether these were agricultural rituals or just very committed parties. Back in the moment, your guide stops digging and points to a dark shape sliding through the water. Snapping turtle, he says. They love fresh mud. You watch it paddle lazily along the edge of its head like a miniature dinosaur's. The man whistles a 2-note tune, and somehow the turtle pauses as if acknowledging him, then vanishes under a lily pad. The man wipes his hands on his trousers. Time for the ridge. You help him build a thin walkway of soil and reeds between 2 beds, a kind of raised dike that lets farmers move without stepping in the water. Dry feet, dry crops, he mutters, though his own feet are absolutely soaked. He offers you a bite of something from a leaf wrapping. It's warm, spicy, vaguely sweet. Chilacayote, he explains. A kind of squash. We grow it because the gods like it, and so do toddlers. You take another bite. He's right. As the sun leans westward, the light turns syrupy. Shadows from the willows stretch long across the plots, and a quiet settles over the beds. You've seen dozens of chinampas now, each with their own character, some messy and wild, others manicured like bonsai gardens. One had only herbs, another was all flowers. One was overrun by geese, and all of them were alive, breathing, rooted in water and memory. You sit for a while at the edge of a newly formed bed. Your hands ache, your back is furious, but your chest feels oddly light. This, you realize, is how you make a floating garden, one scoop of mud. One whispered prayer, one layer of life at a time. The air is thick with the scent of lake silt and crushed basil as you paddle slowly around a newly planted chinampa, your hands sore from the work of the morning. You've left the shovel behind, but the rhythm still echoes in your shoulders. Each movement of the oar now feels less like effort and more like memory. And then you see them. Trees planted in rows, almost too symmetrical to be natural. At first glance, it's just a quiet grove beside a waterway. But as your boat coasts closer, the trees reveal their purpose. Willows, dozens of them. Their roots disappear into the dark water, their trunks lining the perimeter of each floating bed like silent guardians. The leaves dance in the breeze like ribbons, and the entire scene feels half sacred, half strategic. You step off the boat barefoot this time. The soft squelch beneath your heel is oddly soothing. A woman with a woven crown of reeds nods toward the trees. They keep everything from falling apart, she says, as if explaining gravity. The Ahuhot's native willows aren't just for shade or decoration. Their root systems are the hidden architecture of the chinampa. They dig deep, binding the layers of soil and compost together, anchoring them to the lakebed, resisting erosion with the quiet strength of centuries. Without them, this whole muddy miracle would just float away. She gestures for you to follow. You trail behind her as she moves along the chinampa's edge, her sandals barely making a sound. She pats the trunk of one of the older willows. "This one's my grandfather," she says with a sly grin. "He used to yell when I overwatered the chilies. Now he just leans." You chuckle, but she's not joking entirely. Trees here are treated like family. They're planted at the birth of children. They're whispered to during storms. They're hugged, yes, hugged after a good harvest. And it makes sense. These trees are what turn a mound of mud into a sustainable plot of land. Their roots help oxygenate the soil, prevent runoff, and shade fragile plants during hot months. More than that, they serve as visual anchors marking the corners of each garden with time-worn wisdom. Mainstream historians point out that the use of willows wasn't just practical, it was elegant. The Ahuhot grows fast, is easy to shape, and survives in soggy soil where most other trees would rot. Their branches were harvested to build fences, frames, even ceremonial instruments. A tree that gives structure and song, yeah, you'd hug it too, but there's also something poetic in it. This whole place, the chinampa system, relies on cooperation, not domination. The lake could destroy these beds in an afternoon. The farmers know this, the trees know it too. She pauses near one particularly ancient willow and shows you a strange knotted growth near the base, almost like a mouth gnarled and toothless. "He talks," she whispers, "but only after rain." Historians still argue whether these tree rituals were religious or simply local folklore wrapped in superstition. But then again, maybe those are the same thing. Faith and farming have always held hands, especially where survival depends on water levels and the mood of the sky. You lean against the trunk and close your eyes. The breeze makes the branches murmur. Somewhere a duck quacks, a baby cries, a shovel clinks against a basket, and all the while these willows keep watching, remembering holding the edges of the world in place. Further down the chinampa, a boy no older than 10 is planting seedlings in neat rows beneath the trees. You join him kneeling beside a small trough filled with tiny green shoots. He shows you how to scoop the earth, just so how to press it gently around the roots, how to whisper Xochitl if the plant is a flower. "Why whisper, you ask?" He shrugs. "Because it's rude not to." You can't argue with that. Later, as the sun tilts downward and the light turns to honey, you walk the length of a chinampa flanked by willows that lean toward each other like gossiping grandmothers. Their reflections ripple in the canal beside you, distorting just enough to make you wonder if maybe, just maybe, they're nodding in approval. You reach the end of the plot and look back. The straight lines of the garden, the bent arms of the trees, the water always moving but never rushing. It's not chaotic, it's designed, and you realize that this ecosystem isn't passive, it's in quiet conversation. The soil feeds the plants shade the soil, the willows hold it all together, and the humans just keep the rhythm going. A floating garden. No, that's not quite right. It's more like an orchestra on mud stilts, and the willows, they're the bass section, steady grounding, ancient. You'd never notice them until they stop playing. But thank the gods they never do. You're back on the water again, drifting slowly past rows of chinampas, glowing gold in the late afternoon light. But something catches your attention, an unusual burst of color amid the greens and browns of the gardens. It's a splash of red, yellow, orange flowers, neatly planted, impossibly vibrant, and radiating the kind of symmetry only achieved when a farmer is part artist, part priest. You ease the canoe toward the plot and the scent hits you before the boat bumps the bank. Sweet marigolds, peppery nasturtiums, and something sharp and earthy like crushed leaves after rain. A woman is bent over the beds pruning with care. She doesn't look up, but she speaks. "These are for the market," she says, "and for the temples." You step onto the chinampa. It's narrower than most, bordered by smaller canals that look too tight to paddle through. "You grow all this just for decoration, you ask?" She straightens and gives you a look like you just suggested planting rocks. "No, we grow for beauty. That's different. The Aztecs didn't just grow food in their chinampas, they cultivated flowers en masse. Marigolds especially were sacred, used in ceremonies, offerings, and funerals. They were believed to guide spirits with their scent and color. You run your hand over one and it's surprisingly soft, almost velvety. The woman leads you deeper into the plot. Rows of flowers grow in near perfect alignment with channels between them for weeding, watering, and harvesting. Every few steps you see a low altar, a slab of stone, a carved figure, a bowl filled with petals. This one's for Xochitl, she says, tapping her lip with a dirty finger. Goddess of flowers, love, childbirth. A beat. She doesn't like boring arrangements. Joke, not joke, hard to say. She hands you a bundle of herbs, basil, hoja santa, and something you don't recognize, and asks you to help lay it along the edge of the altar. You do careful not to disturb the tiny clay figurines arranged beside it. You realize something subtle. The chinampa isn't just a farming method, it's a calendar. Some plots are planted to bloom on specific days. Others are tied to moon cycles, feast days, or birthdays. This one, a birthday garden. The woman's daughter turns 16 today. There's a cake-shaped mound of soil decorated with flower petals and a single lit candle. No frosting, no sugar. Just scent and symbolism. You smile despite yourself. You're offered a tamale, a small one wrapped in corn husk and filled with beans and squash. You bite into it while seated cross-legged between two beds of crimson dahlias. And suddenly you understand this isn't farming. It's choreography. Each chinampa a stage, each flower a step in the dance, each harvest a crescendo. And you a very confused but willing guest star. Quirky fact, the Aztecs had entire schools Calmacac where students were trained in not just warfare and astronomy, but floral arrangement. Some ceremonies required offerings in precise botanical patterns, often arranged in spirals or glyphs. There are records of gardeners being fined not for poor yield, but for using the wrong petal color on an altar. Historians still debate whether these fines were actually enforced or just symbolic, but either way the message was clear: flowers matter. As you chew thoughtfully on your tamale, a small girl skips by dropping petals behind her in a trail. You ask what she's doing. Leaving a map, she says simply, and keeps walking. You lie back for a moment on a woven mat beneath a trellis of flowering vines. The sun filters through the leaves, painting the inside of your eyelids gold. A flute plays somewhere across the canal. Or maybe it's just the wind through the reeds. Here the pace of life is dictated not by clocks, but by blossoms. The woman returns with a clay bowl of water and flower heads. She sets it beside you. For dreams, she says. You nod like you know what that means. You don't, but you're fine with it. Your hands are stained green. Your knees are damp. You smell like mint and marigolds. And as you watch a dragonfly land on the altar, its wings catching the last light of the day, you wonder, maybe this is how civilizations stay alive. Not through conquest or coins, but through care, through color, through petals floated downstream like love letters to the gods. The next morning begins not with an alarm, but with the steady sound of voices. Rhythmic, low, and repeating like a song you can't quite place. You stir beneath a reed mat on the edge of a chinampa, stretching limbs sore from yesterday's weeding, and glance toward the water. A line of farmers is already working. But this is no frantic scramble. It's methodical, almost meditative. You wade into the day slowly, your feet sliding into sandals left drying on a stone. Someone hands you a warm drink. It smells like cinnamon and roasted maize. Your hands curl around the clay cup automatically. A priest in simple robes, white sun-bleached, stained with soil, stands at the center of a gathering beside the garden. He draws a circle in the dirt, then a line, then a series of glyphs you don't recognize. Everyone watches. The air is still. Then in silence they begin. You've stumbled into the garden clock, a ritual as much as a schedule. This group follows a solar calendar mixed with lunar observations and daily habits passed down through generations. The timing of watering, harvesting, even when to turn the soil is governed by cues from the natural world. One man holds up a turtle, another blows into a conch, a child tosses flower petals into the canal to mark the hour. It's not superstition. It's precision disguised as poetry. You join a man smoothing out a bed of freshly turned earth. We work with the sun, he says, not looking up. But the moon decides when to pull weeds. You blink. The moon, he nods, still patting the soil. Pull during the waxing phase, plants recover faster, then adds, don't try to understand it all, just feel it. Mainstream historians recognize the Aztec calendar as a dual system, a 260-day ritual calendar, Tonopawali, and a 365-day solar calendar, Shupawali. These overlapped in complex ways, guiding festivals, sacrifices, and yes, agriculture. Planting wasn't just practical, it was divine choreography. Quirky fact: the Aztecs also used a system of day signs where each day had a ruling symbol like wind monkey or rain, and each influenced what kind of work was most auspicious. Some farmers refused to plant maize on a snake day for fear it would twist in the womb of the earth. Back in real time, you're now waist deep in a boat filled with harvested amaranth. The stalks are reddish beaded with seeds. You ferry them to a canal-side platform where women in wide-brimmed hats sing while sorting. The song is soft rising and falling like a lullaby made of honey. Someone taps your shoulder and points to a woven disc near the altar. It looks like a sundial, except it's made of seeds feathers and 2 obsidian shards. The priest steps forward again and adjusts one of the feathers slightly. Noon, he declares, you squint. How do you know? He grins. The birds told me. Historians still argue whether the Aztecs had a formal mechanical timekeeping device. There's no definitive evidence of gears or wheels, but many believe their priests and astronomers used tools like shadow sticks and star maps to track time down to remarkable accuracy. And in Chinampa, farming precision was survival. Too much sun wilting, too much water rot. Miss the sweet spot and your garden doesn't just falter, it fails. You help transfer baskets of herbs onto a shaded platform arranged by type and moisture level. You're told this is to teach them how to dry without dying. Okay then, as afternoon swells, the garden's quiet again. This time you're led to a resting hut on stilts at the Chinampa's edge. Inside, clay pots, dried reeds, woven mats, and a tiny shrine with obsidian mirrors. A young girl offers you a tamarind ball rolled in chili powder. Your tongue thanks her. Your sinuses protest. You ask her if she knows what time it is. She tilts her head. Late flower, she says. You nod slowly as if that makes perfect sense. And perhaps it does, because here in this maze of floating gardens, time isn't just something measured. It's something planted, tended, pruned, a crop just like everything else. You drift back to the canal's edge and watch a line of ducks march in single file across a narrow causeway. One stops, sneezes, you think, and waddles on. A flower opens, a paddle splashes. The shadow of a willow tilts 3 degrees. And just like that, afternoon becomes evening. You wake from a nap you didn't remember starting. The light has changed again, cooler now, brushing everything in blue-gold tones, as if the sun is just behind a curtain. The air smells faintly of fish and wet stone. You sit up on the reed mat, blink, and realize something's missing. Noise. The gardeners are gone. Or rather, they've moved elsewhere. The Chinampa is quiet except for the sound of gentle splashes and the occasional creak of wood. You stretch joints cracking like dried corn husks and follow the narrow path to the canal. Your boat is already waiting. But this time you're not alone. Your new guide wears a robe that isn't muddy. White cotton, unblemished, cinched at the waist. His face is painted faintly with ash and his hands bear the calluses of someone who works in silence. He doesn't speak, just motions for you to sit. You do, and then he paddles smooth, efficient, without hurry. The boat glides through narrow water channels shaded by leaning willows and tall stalks of flowering basil. You're not sure how long you travel, 5 minutes, 20 an hour. Time bends here like the canals. Finally, you arrive. This part of the Chinampa system is quieter. Fewer vegetables, no ducks. Just carefully sculpted garden beds, each adorned with ceremonial items. Obsidian shards, jade beads, feathers, bundles of dried herbs. Your guide finally speaks in a voice so soft it seems borrowed from the wind. This is where we keep time, he says. You follow him along a path that leads to a stone platform rising slightly above the gardens. From here you can see the canal grid in all directions, narrow beds stretching toward the horizon, water glinting between them like veins of light. Then you notice the stone circles. They aren't altars, they're instruments. One is a flat slab marked with concentric rings and small indentations filled with colored sand. Another has shadows that dance along carefully placed reeds. These are part of the Aztec water clock system. Low-tech but shockingly precise methods of tracking the day's flow, harvest cycles and ritual moments. Your guide lifts a shallow bowl clay rimmed in turquoise. He dips it in the canal, waits a few seconds, then lifts it again. Water drips through a hole in the center at a steady rate. He places it gently in a second larger bowl and watches it drain. 3 drips per breath, he murmurs. This, you realize, is not just measurement, it's meditation. The Aztecs lacked mechanical clocks as we know them, but they used water clocks, sun positions, and shadow tracking tools to organize their day. Historians still argue over the exact configuration of their timekeeping practices. Some believe priests used marked bowls like this to time ceremonies, while others suggest more metaphorical meanings. But watching the water fall now rhythmically, silently, you start to get it. It's not about numbers, it's about awareness. Your guide points east toward the rising smoke from cooking fires. That's breakfast, he says. Then west, where shadows stretch long over the gardens. That's memory. You blink. What's this then? He gestures to the bowl, almost empty now. This is attention. You sit beside him in silence, listening to the last drops fall. In the distance, a flute begins to play. Just 3 notes repeated slowly. You turn to ask a question, but he's already moved. You follow him to a series of narrow bridges strung between the chinampas. Here you see the daily rhythm playing out, women drawing watermen, unloading baskets of corn children, scooping out floating algae with handmade rakes. The sun is lower now, shadows long and soft. The rhythm is unmistakable. One canoe paddles up beside the bridge. Inside, bundles of fish tied with reeds, handfuls of herbs still dripping with dew, and 2 woven bags filled with flowers. The paddler nods at you. Market run, he says. It hits you all at once. This city runs like a living clock. The people are gears, the water is the pulse, and the gardens. The ticking hands measuring not just food or time, but life itself. Quirky fact, Aztec rulers often scheduled festivals and sacrifices according to both celestial events and the rhythms of the chinampas. Some temples even delayed ceremonies if the maize wasn't awake yet. There are records of priests sniffing the stalks and muttering, "He still sleeps," before canceling an entire ritual. You sit back and let the last light wash over you, filtered through willow branches and the faint shimmer of canal water. You don't need a watch. The garden tells you everything. You just have to listen. The next time you blink, you're surrounded by noise again. Not temple flutes or dripping bowls, but the sharp, fast chatter of voices, bartering footsteps slapping damp wood, and the deep gluk-gluk of shifting water under heavy baskets. You've arrived at one of the busiest places in Tenochtitlan, the floating marketplace. But this isn't like any market you've seen. No walls, no tents, just docks, platforms, and dozens of canoes bumping gently against each other in a sort of choreographed aquatic chaos. You disembark at a narrow wooden jetty where a boy no older than 8 shoves a bunch of chilies into your hands and then promptly disappears with a grin and a wink. He gifts someone, mutters behind you. Or a test. The scent of the market is overwhelming: roasted maize, drying fish, fresh herbs, wet wood and sweat. Someone's selling tamales from a boat shaped like a fish. Another woman fans away flies from a display of frogs tied by their ankles. A pile of squash taller than a man is being haggled over by 2 women who sound like they're about to duel with words alone. Welcome to the logistical heart of the chinampa system. You step aside as a team of farmers offload baskets from their canoe. They're quick, practiced. One hands you a bundle to carry. It's heavier than it looks and smells faintly of mint and mud. You follow them onto a raised platform where trade is being tallied. Each farmer sets down their goods and receives a painted clay token, one for every set of 3 bundles. You lean in. Currency, you ask. No one replies. Records, you show the priest. He tells the taxman, "Ah, yes, the tribute system." Tenochtitlan didn't just rely on its chinampas to feed itself. The goods were distributed upward. Markets, temples, nobility. You get the sense that every squash and sunflower makes its way to someone very important eventually. Mainstream historical fact, the Aztecs had one of the most sophisticated market systems in the pre-Columbian Americas. At Tlatelolco, Tenochtitlan's twin city and marketplace, tens of thousands gathered daily to trade everything from obsidian blades to live jaguars. And the chinampas, they were the engine keeping the whole system fed and beautiful. You watch as a merchant carefully unloads a canoe filled entirely with flowers. Yes, again. You start to ask who buys so many blossoms when a passing trader gestures toward the temple in the distance. "Gods need color," she says simply. Then she hands you a flat tray filled with axolotls, those weird little amphibians that look like smiling dragons. "For soup," you ask. She laughs. "For now, for medicine, for stories." Quirky tidbit. Axolotls weren't just food or pets. They were believed to possess regenerative powers able to regrow limbs, heal without scars, and swim between worlds. Some Aztec myths claim that they were the final form of gods who had fled transformation. Historians still argue whether they were farmed deliberately or simply cohabited the canal systems naturally. Either way, you now find yourself gently holding one, and yes, it's smiling. The woman pats your hand. Careful. They remember faces. You wander deeper into the market, dodging a boat filled with live ducks and another peddling jars of dark green slime that smells suspiciously like despair and algae. Children dart between platforms, trading marbles made of baked clay. A priest paints tally marks onto a hide scroll with red pigment and a quill made from a heron feather. At one stall, a man is frying water insects in a shallow clay pan. He offers you one on a leaf. You hesitate. "What is it, protein?" he replies. You eat it. It's crispy, slightly smoky, and honestly, not bad. You lean on a post and just watch for a moment. Boats arrive, boats leave. Baskets shift hands. Tokens change fingers. A duck escapes and flaps angrily through a pile of chilies. No one panics. The market absorbs everything. You help load one last canoe bound for the temple, fish, beans, flowers, and something wrapped in leaves that no one will explain. As it floats off, you're struck again by the efficiency, the beauty, the movement of it all. This is not a society scraping by. This is a machine, organic, rhythmic, ancient. And you were part of it, if only for a moment. As the sun begins to dip, the traders start to pack up. The laughter softens, the baskets grow lighter, and the chinampas, still visible in every direction, settle into the hush of evening. You paddle away slowly one last time, trailing fingers in the water. The market fades behind you, but the hum of it lingers like the memory of a good conversation. You glide down a narrower canal, now the water darker, more reflective, like obsidian polished to perfection. The laughter of the market is a distant echo. In its place, frogs, croaking, dragonflies buzzing, and the occasional splutch of something dropping into the water that you hope was just a frog. Your guide this time is older, his back curved like a tilled furrow, his voice barely above a whisper, but with a tone that makes you straighten when he speaks. He rows with slow, deliberate strokes, and after a long pause, he finally says, "Chinampas are peace, until they're not." You look around rows of flourishing plants, fruit trees heavy with guavas, wild basil bushes nearly glowing in the light. This doesn't seem like a place for conflict. He smiles. That's because you haven't seen the weeds. You think he's joking. He's not. The boat stops near a bed completely overtaken by algae. Green film clings to the surface like a misplaced carpet. Vines have wrapped themselves around the stalks of young beans, and mosquitoes rise in swarms when the ore disturbs the surface. Even paradise, he says, gets lazy. You disembark carefully. The ground here is squishier than elsewhere. Years of poor maintenance have softened its structure. The old man points at a low fence. No willow, no drainage. This is what happens when the garden thinks it can grow without help. You join him as he pulls invasive vines from the cornrows. He explains that chinampa upkeep isn't just about planting and harvesting. It's a constant battle against encroachment. Plants grow too fast. Water levels fluctuate. Without balance, the system collapses into muck. And then, of course, there are the humans. Two families used to share this one, he mutters, pulling at a stubborn root. Until one blocked the canal upstream. You raise an eyebrow. By accident, he gives you a side glance. Does it matter? Turns out chinampa life included plenty of petty politics. Farmers had to maintain water flow not just for their own plots, but for their neighbors. If someone upstream decided to dam a canal, say to hoard water during a dry spell, it could destroy every bed below. Arguments erupted. Baskets were overturned. One story even claims a man cursed an entire canal by tossing in a sacred figurine, causing a suspicious string of pumpkin failures. Historians still argue whether there were formal canal courts. Some sources suggest priests or city officials acted as mediators. Others claim it was all handled with passive-aggressive paddle gestures and gossip. But either way, water rights were serious business. You pause to watch a group of boys wading chest-deep with hand nets. They're scooping something from the algae. Spirulina, the old man says. Good protein, bad manners. He spits into the reeds. Quirky fact, the Aztecs harvested spirulina algae from Lake Texcoco and dried it into cakes called tequilitl, which they sometimes fed to warriors and messengers for energy. One Spanish friar famously dismissed it as green scum, but modern science now praises it as a superfood. So, who's laughing now? You help shovel muck into a compost basket. Every so often, the old man points out which weeds are friendly and which ones are traitors. You're not sure he's speaking metaphorically. Then the shovel strikes something hard. You dig around and uncover an old obsidian blade, still sharp. The old man picks it up, turns it over in his hands, then sets it gently at the base of a tree. Garden remembers, he says, even when we don't. You nod, uncertain whether to be creeped out or deeply moved. As the sun continues to drop, shadows deepen. Mosquitoes emerge like a second atmosphere. You're handed a paste of herbs to rub on your arms, fragrant, tingly, oddly effective. The old man slaps a swarm away with his hat and mutters something about city boys who plant mint next to swamp grass. You begin to see the bigger picture. Chinampas aren't just lush, floaty postcards. They're ecosystems resilient but delicate, requiring constant attention, care, and, yes, confrontation. They demand collaboration, but breed competition. They offer abundance, but only for those willing to get muddy and keep the peace. You glance down the canal. A figure in a canoe is blocking the narrow passage. Another farmer approaches from the other direction. They stare at each other in complete silence. You hold your breath. Then, without a word, one steps aside, a quiet truce. Just another day on the water. The old man sighs. Gardens teach you patience, he says, or they eat you. You wake before dawn, not by choice, but because someone's gently shaking your shoulder and offering you a tamale wrapped in steam. You'll want to eat before the flowers arrive, she says cryptically. Still half asleep, you follow her to a canoe already loaded with bundles of marigolds, cacao pods, and bundles of herbs tied with string and feathers. Another woman is placing clay bowls of food carefully in a shallow basket, and a boy is carrying what looks like a turkey. You hesitate. Is this breakfast? She grins. No, it's breakfast for the gods. You're headed to a flower offering ceremony, one of many small rituals that happen daily on the chinampas. Not all Aztec rituals were bloody or dramatic. Many, especially those tied to agriculture, were quiet, reverent, even joyful. The boat glides toward a central platform, a wide chinampa, dedicated not to farming, but to worship. Its surface is cleared except for a circular altar inlaid with mosaic stones and petals. Already other boats are arriving from all sides like dragonflies returning to the same bloom. Everyone disembarks quietly. A low hum of chants begins, not loud, not polished, but pulsing. You're handed a basket of marigold heads and shown how to toss them in slow arcs onto the altar, each one whispering a thank you. This one's for rain, someone says. For a good squash harvest, says another. For my brother's back. There are no priests here, no elaborate garb, just people, many of them farmers, all offering the best of what their chinampas have grown: flowers, fruits, tamale seeds. A woman even places a small, slightly wilted tomato on the altar with a chuckle and a muttered apology. Quirky fact. Some Aztec sources describe entire floating altars, ceremonial chinampas, built for specific deities, especially Xochipilli, god of flowers and art, and Chicomacoatl, goddess of sustenance. These offerings weren't just gestures, they were insurance. You gave thanks, or the lake might take it back. You kneel beside a child who's carefully pouring a bowl of chocolate into the canal, letting it swirl away like smoke in water. For Tlaloc, he says simply, "Ah yes, Tlaloc the rain god, terrifying, frog-eyed, and fond of children's tears." But here his name is spoken like a kindly uncle. There's respect in it, and also a kind of partnership. The gods feed the rain, the people feed the gods, and somewhere between those two forces, the chinampas. You stand as the chanting fades, replaced by the sound of reed flutes and the rustle of fabric as offerings are packed up. A man taps you on the shoulder and hands you a single blossom. "Take it back with you," he says, "but don't drop it." You try not to look nervous. Back at the smaller garden, the morning is in full swing. The woman who woke you earlier is now cooking tamales over an open fire. Her husband, you presume, is pruning chili bushes with a knife that's clearly older than he is. You sit on the edge of the bed watching the canal. A canoe glides past filled with paper flowers, yes, paper dyed with natural pigments. They'll be burned later as part of another ceremony. "This one's for Xochitl," the woman says, handing you a drink that tastes like liquid corn and cinnamon. "My daughter. She was born on a flower day. We grow everything with her name on it." You look around and realize this entire chinampa is covered in blooming plants. Not just for the gods, not just for show, but for love. Mainstream historical fact. The Aztecs placed immense value on naming and symbolic identity. Many children were named according to the day sign of their birth in the Tonopohualli calendar. Certain names carried agricultural expectations. Children born on Tokli rabbit days were often destined to be farmers or cooks, tied to fertility and sustenance. You ask how long it takes to prepare a ceremony like the one you saw earlier. She smiles. The planting starts months before. The flowers know where they are going. You ask if the gods really eat the food. She shrugs. Not with mouths, but maybe with weather. You both laugh. Later, you help clean out the old flower stems from yesterday's harvest, stacking them beside the compost pile. Nothing is wasted. Even the most sacred offering becomes mulch. Even a gift to the gods ends up feeding squash. The child from earlier waves at you as she rows past with a basket of mangoes. Don't forget your blossom, she calls, and you touch your pocket reflexively. The petals are slightly bruised now, but still fragrant, still bright, and in this place that's enough. By now, your arms know how to row without being asked. The paddle dips, pulls, and glides through the dark water with a rhythm your shoulders recognize better than your mind. You're no longer a tourist in this world of floating gardens. You're part of the current. As the sun rises higher, its light catches on the temple in the distance. The Templo Mayor seat of the empire's power towers above the mist like a stone crown. Its steps are steep, its shadows long. You stare at it for a long time, barely paddling, and wonder how does a world of flowers and fish coexist with that? Then a tomato smacks you on the shoulder. You blink startled and look around. A man on a nearby chinampa holds up another overripe tomato, eyebrow raised. He's laughing, but not unkindly. You were drifting, he says, grinning. You pull the canoe to his plot and step out, rubbing your shoulder. The ground here is dry and orderly. Squash vines are neatly pruned, and the tomato rows are impossibly straight. The man hands you a basket. We work, you think later. And so you begin again, trimming, staking, checking for pests. He shows you how to spot the tiny holes left by corn borers, how to snap the bad leaves cleanly, how to mutter tisk like an old man, even if you're 35. The heat builds. You wipe your brow. The temple glints in the distance. Do you ever go there, you ask? He doesn't look up. Me no, a beat. I send tomatoes. That gets a laugh out of you. He finally stands and stretches his back with a groan. Everyone wants to look at the temple, but the tomatoes don't grow there. It's a quiet truth. The grandeur of Tenochtitlan may rise in stone and blood, but it is these humble waterbound plots that feed it. Mainstream historical fact. The Templo Mayor was the religious heart of the Aztec capital, dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, god of war, and Tlaloc, god of rain. While chinampas often lay miles away from the temple district, their harvests were central to the rituals. Offerings of maize flowers, tamales, and more were routinely ferried to the temple as tribute. Quirky tidbit. A 16th century account by a Spanish friar notes that Aztec priests once offered perfect fruits grown in chinampas, specifically ones that were symmetrical and unblemished, as divine gifts. The belief was that the gods were picky eaters. Back on the chinampa, you follow the farmer to a low shelter at the corner of the garden. Inside, bundles of dried herbs hang from the ceiling like sleepy bats. Clay pots hold pickled nopales, fermented chili paste, and a dark, sticky syrup made from cooked maguey sap. He offers you a taste of something spicy sweet. It burns and then warms your whole chest like a sunbeam trapped in your lungs. We grow for the stomach, he says, and for the stories. You raise an eyebrow. Stories, he points to a small flat stone covered in painted symbols. Every chinampa keeps a calendar, but some also keep a memory. You lean in. The symbols are unfamiliar, but one stands out, a red squash with a jagged line through it. My brother planted the cursed gourd, he says, completely deadpan. You try not to laugh, he doesn't. Grew to the size of a canoe. Split itself in half, ruined the whole row. Birds wouldn't even touch it. Cursed, huh? He nods solemnly. I told him not to plant on fire day. Ah, of course. You leave the shelter and return to the tomato rows. He lets you harvest now. You learn how to twist gently, check the firmness, avoid the ones with cracked skins. Don't pick the perfect ones, he says. Those are for the gods. You save a few perfect ones anyway and place them gently in a separate basket. In the distance, the temple watches. Closer, the basil hums with bees. You think about the contrast, war gods and chili fields, sacred altars and mud-slick weeds, the highest steps of the empire, and the blisters on this man's hands. And you realize there is no contradiction. The empire doesn't exist without this garden. The gods don't eat without these rows. Every triumph in stone began here in mud. Before you leave, he hands you a sun-warmed tomato. You bite into it, sweet, sharp, alive. He nods satisfied. That one's not for the gods. That one, it seems, is for you. You're paddling again, this time toward the city's heart. The temples shrink behind you, the gardens tighten, and the water becomes narrower, more engineered. Canals crisscross like a grid, now bordered not by willows, but by stone walls and stucco platforms. The scent of herbs and compost is replaced by something sharper, limestone dust incense and sewage. Ah yes, welcome to the urban plumbing of Tenochtitlan. As the boat glides forward, your guide points to a narrow culvert cut into the canal's edge. Waste channel, he says, goes to the southern basin. The Aztecs, surprised, planned their plumbing. The city was divided into districts, each with designated drainage canals, public baths, and waste zones. Waste was collected, sometimes even traded, and then, brace yourself, used as fertilizer. That's right. The elegant tomato you admired yesterday may have once had an intimate relationship with someone's lunch from last week. Waste makes the best gardens, your guide says, clearly amused at your expression. The gods don't waste anything. Mainstream fact, the Mexica had one of the most sophisticated urban sanitation systems in the pre-modern world. They separated clean water from waste-used aqueducts to bring in fresh spring water and had designated sewage canoes. Yes, a job that involved paddling through canals with buckets of, well, you get it. A group of men rows past you now, their canoes stacked with large clay pots. One of them, waves. Bath delivery, he calls. Your guide explains these pots contain heated water, sometimes infused with herbs, delivered to wealthier homes or temple steam houses called temazcal, part spa, part medical facility. The temazcal was a vital piece of city hygiene. You pass one soon after, set just off a canal bend, shaded by a thick copse of trees. Steam curls lazily from a low-thatched dome. A woman emerges, her skin shining, carrying a bundle of sweat-soaked towels. She pauses to wave at your boat with a towel, then disappears into the trees. This, your guide says, is where health begins. You step onto a small dock and are led through a narrow alley lined with polished stones. It opens into a public bath area, open air, but private, tiled with red and black stones. A pair of elderly men are seated waist-deep in one of the pools, arguing loudly over which chili plant causes more indigestion. Chiltepin, one insists. No poblano. Too earthy, the other counters. You move on quickly. Behind the pools, you find a temple courtyard garden, surprisingly quiet. The beds here are smaller, ornamental, curated. Tiny sculptures peek between squash vines. A row of cacao trees hums with bees. A priest in indigo robes tends a narrow water channel, using a hollow gourd to redirect the flow. The gods want us clean, he tells you. Quirky tidbit. The Aztecs were obsessive about bathing. Nobles bathed daily, and even commoners were expected to keep themselves clean. Sweat baths, temazcal, were prescribed for everything from digestive problems to spiritual purification. Some even bathed before speaking in court to wash away untruths. Your guide gestures toward a small structure nearby, low, simple, shadowed. That was Moctezuma's garden, he whispers. You raise an eyebrow. Not the Moctezuma, he adds, his uncle. Inside, a narrow path winds between raised garden beds, surrounded by a trickling water feature. Jade-colored frogs lounge on lily pads. Exotic plants, ones you haven't seen on the other chinampas, flourish here. Orchids, peppers with golden skins. Small trees with blood-red bark. It's quiet, almost holy. Medicinal, your guide says, and forbidden. You catch his meaning. Some plants were restricted, grown only for rulers, priests, or healers. Their use was tightly controlled, their seeds counted. One legend claims a man was executed for stealing a single sacred cacao pod. Historians still argue whether this was true enforcement or just dramatic storytelling. But in this space, with the water whispering secrets to the roots, you believe it. As the afternoon deepens, the light catches on small terracotta pipes embedded in the canal walls. Some bringing in water, others taking it out. This system breathes just like the gardens. Inhale, exhale. Before you return to the canoe, you stop at a public hand-washing basin where women are rinsing herbs and gossiping cheerfully. One offers you a sweet-smelling leaf to rub between your fingers. Good for digestion, she says, and for lies. You blink. She winks. As you climb back into the boat, your guide chuckles. The cleanest city in the world, he says, and the dirtiest stories. The paddle dips again, the temple fades, the canals open, and the chinampas return blooming like they never left. You've seen tomatoes, flowers, chilies, even sewage. You've paddled under temple shadows and napped beside compost piles, but now the boat drifts into a quieter section of the lake, one where the water lies still thick with green strands, and the air carries a strange hum as if the reeds themselves are whispering. Your guide says nothing. He simply lifts his hand and points. You lean forward, and there it is, floating in the shallows, gills flared and tail swaying like seaweed in axolotl. You blink, it blinks back. If you've never seen one before, imagine a salamander who never finished growing up, permanently stuck in its tadpole phase and wearing a little fringe of frilly external gills, like it's ready for a masquerade ball. Cute, strange, slightly unsettling, like a dragon and a plush toy had an awkward baby. Don't touch, your guide whispers. They remember. You sit still. It floats closer. These creatures aren't just wildlife. To the Mexica, the axolotl was sacred. Some believed it was the god Xolotl who fled from sacrifice and transformed himself into this shy, water-dwelling being, forever hiding in the canals, forever half god, half creature. Mainstream historical fact. Axolotls are a species of amphibian native only to the Valley of Mexico, particularly Lake Xochimilco, part of the broader Texcoco system. They're famous in modern science for their regenerative abilities. They can regrow limbs, spinal cords, even parts of their hearts and brains. Ancient Mexica people knew something was special here, so they listened. You follow your guide as he ties the canoe near a muddy landing. A small hut sits nearby, draped in nets and drying gourds. Inside, stone bowls filled with water plants and, yes, more axolotls. A woman greets you with a nod. She's preparing a kind of medicinal paste, grinding herbs, with a pestle pausing now and then to whisper over a bowl. One axolotl floats within it, entirely unbothered. This one was sick, she says, pointing to a pale patch on its back. Now he's dreaming better. You nod slowly, unsure if dreaming better is a technical diagnosis. Outside, you hear a splash. Another axolotl surfaces, its gills pulsing gently. The woman continues. We don't eat them often, she says. Only if the gods are angry. Only if the stars ask. Quirky fact, despite their near-divine status, axolotls were sometimes eaten often as part of sacred meals for warriors or offerings to deities. The meat was said to bring calm to the blood and clarity to the eyes. But not everyone agreed. Some priests insisted that killing an axolotl would curse your children with crooked limbs. Historians still argue whether this was literal belief or just very persuasive early conservation. You crouch beside a small pond where dozens of axolotls swim like ancient thoughts. Some are pale pink, others dark as obsidian. All of them watch you like you might turn into a gnat or a god at any moment. Your guide sits beside you and tosses in a few crushed insects. The water ripples. These gardens, he says, are theirs as much as ours. He tells you how axolotls eat mosquito larvae and algae, keeping canals clean. Their presence meant the water was balanced, neither too foul nor too fast. Some farmers swore they'd stop planting if no axolotls appeared by planting day. A bad omen, a whisper from the mud. You listen to the hush between water and air. The reeds rustle. One axolotl lazily does a slow-motion backflip. Later, you help the woman and release a few of the stronger ones back into the canal. She chants softly as each one swims away. You catch a few words, dream, root, skin, light, all things gardens need. Before you leave, she presses something into your hand, a carved seed, smooth and warm. For your sleep, she says, so you don't lose your body. You don't ask what that means. You don't want to know. Back on the canoe, the axolotl pond fades behind you. The wind picks up, the sun is sinking again, and in the rippling canal beside you, just beneath the surface, you think you see another tiny face with wide eyes and a silly smile watching. Maybe Xolotl still swims here laughing to himself, hiding from the stars. Or maybe the chinampas just remember everything. You awaken to drums, not war drums, not the booming kind that echo off temple walls. These are softer, steadier. A low rhythm that seems to rise from the soil itself. You follow the sound, paddling slowly down a canal flanked by towering maize stalks until the water opens into a clearing. And there it is, a military encampment, except it's made of mud and sunflowers. Rows of young men in painted loincloths and feathered armbands are working a chinampa, but not gently. They're digging hard, hauling heavy baskets of wet soil, reinforcing barriers, shaping shallow trenches along the plot's edges. It looks less like farming and more like training. Your canoe bumps a log and someone waves you over. You're just in time, he says. We're testing the irrigation dikes today. You glance at the walls. He's pointing to low embankments of packed earth that run along the chinampa's perimeter. Testing them, you ask. He nods. If it can hold water, it can hold men. Turns out the Aztecs didn't just build chinampas for food. They built them for strategy. Mainstream historical fact. At the height of the empire, some chinampa systems doubled as military preparation zones. Warriors in training would build and maintain sections of the garden, learning to move silently through canals, to carry heavy loads through mud, and to adapt to the unpredictable nature of living terrain. It was discipline disguised as agriculture. You join a line of trainees carrying woven sacks of stones. They're reinforcing a drainage channel, one that could in a pinch be rerouted to flood a pathway or trap an enemy. Water is a weapon, the man next to you mutters. You hadn't thought of it that way. Then he adds, so is hunger. Oof, suddenly every tomato feels more political. As you work, someone shouts and gestures toward the water. A floating target shaped like a jaguar's head drifts into view. The trainees each take a turn, hurling sharpened sticks or slinging small stones. You're invited to try. Your stick hits the water 3 feet short. They still cheer. Now try carrying one, someone jokes, handing you a pack made of netting and reeds stuffed with dirt. It's heavier than expected. The instructor grins. That's your tribute weight. Make it to the dock, or the gods get you instead. You half suspect he's only mostly joking. Quirky fact. In times of political tension, some chinampas were reportedly booby-trapped with hidden pits, thorny underbrush, or even collapsing reed platforms that dumped invaders straight into the canal. Farmers were taught not just to grow food, but to protect it with cunning. Historians still argue whether these were widespread defenses or just isolated acts of local resistance. But your legs now soaked and scratched from crawling under a barbed squash vine vote yes. You take a break under a shading tree where a group of warriors is painting their faces with ashes and crushed flower pigment. One hands you a bowl of the mixture and nods solemnly. For camouflage, he says, then deadpan and skin tightening. You join them anyway, smearing black lines across your cheeks. Someone whistles low. You look like a duck that saw a ghost. Fair. Later, you help reroute water between 2 garden beds using a system of reed pipes and weighted flaps. It's brilliant. A tug here and the water shifts. A block there and the canal changes direction. This is a battlefield, the instructor says. But our enemies are weeds, pests, drought. Then he adds, and the city if they don't pay fair. The statement lingers longer than you expect. It reminds you that these chinampas, peaceful, abundant, beautiful, powered an empire. An empire that didn't hesitate to use violence when tribute was denied or gods went hungry. These gardens weren't just Eden. They were infrastructure. Every bean, every blossom, every axolotl was part of a machine that needed feeding and guarding. You look out at the water again, peaceful, but no longer innocent. Before you go, they give you a token woven straw shaped like a maize kernel. You lasted a day, one of them says. That's more than some warriors. You paddle away, arms aching, face still streaked with ash and pollen. Behind you, the drums begin again, soft, steady, patient, like the chinampas themselves. You leave the warriors and their muddy boot camp behind, gliding back into more familiar waters. Gardens, not guard posts. As the boat drifts through canals dappled with afternoon light, the wind shifts. A new scent rides on it, bitter, warm, slightly sweet. Cacao. You follow the smell like a cartoon character, floating on invisible aroma waves. Around the bend, a small chinampa opens before you, rich with low-growing shrubs, bearing broad leaves and pods shaped like knobby footballs. Chocolate, it turns out, doesn't grow on trees. It grows on trees that act like they're too good for you. Cacao is picky, says a woman perched on a rock beside the garden. Too much sun, it sulks. Too much wind, it drops everything. She waves you over and cracks open a pod. Inside, a glistening cluster of white slimy seeds clings together like a crowd of nervous grapes. You blink. This makes chocolate, you ask. She laughs. After roasting, fermenting, grinding, spicing, whipping, chanting. You hope she's joking. She's not. Cacao in the Aztec world was sacred. A currency, a ritual drink, a status symbol. If maize was the food of the people, cacao was the drink of the gods, and of anyone trying to impress the in-laws. Mainstream historical fact. Cacao beans were literally used as money. A turkey cost about 200 beans, a tamal might go for 1. Nobles drank zocolotl, a spiced, unsweetened chocolate beverage made with water, chili, and sometimes corn. Sugar not yet in the picture. You're handed a gourd cup. The drink is dark, foamy, bitter. You sip. Your eyebrows rise. You'll get used to it, she says. You will not. She leads you through her plot. Beside the cacao trees grow chilies, dozens of varieties from squat yellow devils to long red flamethrowers. She explains that different chinampas specialize in different crops based on soil composition, sun angles, and family preference. I like fire, she says. My sister grows squash. She's boring. You nod as if you're not sweating from one accidental chili nibble. In the corner, a row of vanilla orchids climbs a frame. Thin vines, pale blossoms. The air smells like sunlight with ambition. You pause to help harvest a few chilies, placing them in a basket lined with corn husks. One slips and falls into the canal. A frog snatches it, regrets it instantly. You both stare as it jumps in circles, trying to escape its own tongue. Life lessons, she mutters. Taste before you leap. Quirky tidbit. Some Aztecs believed chilies had personalities, a blend of spirit and attitude. Children were told not to insult chili plants lest the plants curse the flavor of their next meal. Historians still argue whether this was pure folklore or an elaborate parental tool to reduce sass at dinner. You sit for a while on the edge of the chinampa, watching a woman use a flat stone to grind roasted cacao into a paste. She mixes it with chili cornmeal and water, pouring it from vessel to vessel until it foams. A child asks if she can try. The woman raises an eyebrow. You bathed today. The child nods furiously. Show me your feet. The child pauses. No drink. Cleanliness, it turns out, was part of the cacao ritual too. Not because the gods minded dirt, but because sharing cacao was about intention. As the sun begins to dip, you help carry a few baskets to a canoe for delivery. This batch bound for a Kamacac, the school for nobles and priests. They study, the woman says. We supply the motivation. You ask if cacao makes you smarter. She grins. No, but it makes you feel smart. Same thing. Before you go, she hands you a tiny pouch made of maize husk. Inside 3 cacao beans and a pinch of dried chili. For a trade, she says, or for a day when you need to wake up. You paddle away, gourds still bitter on your tongue, pockets slightly richer, and mind tingling with the heat of her garden. Chilies and cacao, the Aztec version of coffee and email. The light is fading now, the sky's shifting from gold to lilac, and your arms are starting to understand the concept of limits. You tell yourself you're heading back to rest, maybe a quiet meal, a hammock, a story by candlelight. But your guide, who materializes beside your canoe like a polite ghost, has other plans. We're going up, he says, as if this is a normal direction in a floating garden world. You follow. A series of narrow footpaths leads to a central platform, a raised mound of earth barely wider than a canoe is long. A staircase made of wooden stones spirals up the side. You climb, and then you see it. From this high perch, the chinampa system spreads below you in a vast green and silver grid, a checkerboard of earth in reflection. The canals are ribbons of dusk. The beds themselves stretch out in rows so precise, so consistent, it's like someone drew them with obsidian ink and a celestial ruler. It's breathtaking. This, your guide says, arms crossed is how the gods play chess. You nod because honestly, that's the best explanation so far. Mainstream historical fact, the Aztecs built observation towers and elevated walkways across parts of the chinampa system, often used for irrigation, oversight, spiritual ceremony, and yes, agricultural management. These structures were typically made from packed earth and wood, designed to withstand storms and allow clear sightlines across large territories. From this high point, you begin to notice patterns you couldn't see from water level. Some chinampas are shaped in glyphs, sun maze water. Others align with solar directions or constellations. You begin to understand this isn't just agriculture, it's architecture of intention, a city planted with meaning. Your guide points to a particularly symmetrical set of beds shaped like an arrow. That one points to the sunrise on the spring equinox, he says. And that one there, he gestures to a curved row near the reeds. That's the serpent's path. You pause. Serpent Quetzalcoatl, he says softly, the morning star, the wisdom bringer. His tail touches the lake, his mouth bites the sky. Of course, quirky fact. Some chinampa layouts were said to mirror the heavens, acting as earthly reflections of celestial movements. Aztec star priests used plant rows and canal alignments to track equinoxes, solstices, and even eclipses, sometimes adjusting harvest schedules based on planetary behavior. Historians still debate how precise these systems were, but the fact remains planting and prophecy were often neighbors. A wind picks up. From this height, you hear the rustle of willows, the slosh of distant oars, The occasional goat bleating in the night, like it just remembered it has opinions. Your guide gestures you to sit. We stay until the torches come on. One by one across the chinampa system, tiny lights begin to bloom, reeds dipped in fat, mounted in clay bowls, glowing orange in the dusk. They're scattered like fireflies across the lake, each one flickering above a bed of corn squash flowers or herbs. They burn to keep away the night moths, he says, and to remind the stars where we are. You sit in silence as more torches flare to life. From above, it looks like someone scattered constellations across the water. You suddenly wonder, who is this all for? The people, the gods, the maze. Maybe all of them. Maybe neither. Maybe the act of planting itself was the ritual. Before you descend, your guide reaches into his cloak and hands you a tiny carved piece of wood. A planting stick, he says. For marking rows, for making lines straight. You turn it over in your palm. It's smoothed by years of use initials carved into the base TL. Someone's legacy, now yours. You climb down slowly, one torch at a time, rejoining the water's edge as night fully arrives. The chinampas, so vibrant by day, now feel like quiet spellwork in the dark. Still structured, still sacred. And far above you, the stars blink back, perhaps jealous of how neat everything looks down here. The water reflects the stars now. You paddle gently, careful not to break the mirrored sky below. The chinampas are quieter at night. No digging, no hauling, no arguments over squash. Spacing, just the whisper of reeds, the occasional hoot of an owl, and the rhythmic splash of your oar. You drift toward a garden that smells of damp earth and wet clay, a scent you're beginning to associate with memory. A man waits at the edge of the chinampa, holding something small and dark in his hands. Soil, he says without preamble, the best part of the whole story. He gestures for you to kneel beside him. You do. He sets a flat basket between you and opens it slowly. It's filled with samples. One is light and crumbly. Another is dark and dense. A third smells vaguely of smoke. Guess which one sings, he says. You hesitate, then point to the darkest. He nods. That's chinampa gold. He sprinkles a pinch onto the back of your hand. It's cool, soft, and smells like it's been awake longer than you. Aztec farmers, you learn, didn't just build gardens. They built soils. The muck at the bottom of Lake Texcoco was nutrient-rich, but needed balance, so they added ashes, compost, ground shells, and even crushed bone. Over time, they created a perfect blend, fluffy, fertile, and absurdly productive. Mainstream historical fact. The success of chinampa farming was largely due to constant replenishment. Farmers dredged canal silt and layered it onto the garden beds, creating a perpetual cycle of growth and renewal. This system maintained high yields without modern fertilizers. You dig your fingers into one of the baskets. The texture is somewhere between velvet and sponge cake. You could nap on it. The man chuckles. Good soil, hums, he says. You ask what he means. He shrugs. You ever dig into dead earth? It feels lonely? This, he pats the basket. This is alive. Quirky tidbit. Some farmers claim that they could feel the mood of their soil. If it was too quiet, they added chicken droppings. If it was too hot, they shaded it with flowers. Some even placed figurines in the corners of their plots, not for luck, but to keep the dirt company. Historians still argue whether this was superstition, early soil biology, or both. But the results speak for themselves, yields that would shame most modern gardens. You follow him to the edge of the chinampa, where he points to the soil cross-section layers like a cake. You can see where the compost sits, where the reeds decayed, where the ash left a pale gray line like smoke trapped in time. He scratches at one layer. That year was wet, he says. Too many snails. Another scratch. This one, frogs everywhere. Loudest harvest of my life. Soil, you realize, isn't just medium, it's memory. As you help him turn a new bed, scooping, flipping, patting, you fall into rhythm. Dig, lift, smooth. Your hands move without thought. The soil smells richer the deeper you go. At one point, you unearth a small figurine clay shaped like a maze god. He takes it gently. She's back, then sets her at the corner of the new row, just like nothing happened. You sit back and wipe your hands on your tunic. Stars blink above. Frogs chirp nearby. The lake laps gently at the edge of the plot like it's breathing. Soil listens, he says. You believe him? Before you leave, he gives you a small pouch filled with the dark mix. For your window box, he jokes. You thank him, tucking it into your satchel with the cacao beans, chili pouch, and planting stick. Your pockets are becoming a museum of things that grow. As you paddle away, the man returns to his work. He sings softly a tune with no words, just hums and breath. A lullaby for the land, and the chinampa answers with silence. You think you've seen every kind of chinampa by now: vegetables, flowers, training grounds, temples, cacao groves. But your next stop is something else entirely. You land beside a plot that's eerily perfect. The rows are laser straight. The corn stalks stand at attention. The walkways between beds are so precise you feel like stepping into them might trigger a trapdoor. This one's different, your guide says. It's for counting. You glance around confused. A man approaches dressed not like a farmer, but like a scribe, robes neatly wrapped fingers stained not with soil, but with black ink. He doesn't greet you so much as start explaining mid-thought. 2 rows of 13 4 beds per cluster, 5 paces between, he says, gesturing. Now watch. He points, and a group of workers, young, precise, serious, steps into the garden. Each walks a path, counts seeds aloud, and places them in geometric patterns. Not scattered, not intuitive. Intentional. Mathematical. You're not just in a garden. You're in a spreadsheet made of mud. Sacred geometry, the scribe says. Planting isn't random. It's rhythm. Mainstream historical fact. The Aztecs believed in the deep cosmic alignment of daily life, including farming. Crops were often planted according to spiritual numerology, multiples of 13, the sacred number of the Tonopawali calendar arrangements that mimic glyphs or rows aligned to cardinal directions for proper sun and spirit flow. The scribe hands you a diagram etched on bark paper. It looks like a puzzle or maybe a secret code. Squares and dots arranged like constellations. Every row speaks, he says, if you listen. You nod slowly, pretending to understand. The workers continue their task. One murmurs the number 4, and you realize every 4th seed is slightly larger. They're embedding a pattern not for yield, but for symbolism. Fertility glyphs, days of the sun, cycles of the maize god. Why go through all this trouble, you ask? Because the gods don't like lazy math, he replies. You step between the rows and feel the strangeness, like walking through a chant. The plants don't just grow here, they align, and so too must you. Quirky fact. Some chinampa fields were designed to echo temple floor plans, maize planted to mirror pyramids, bean trellises that arched like ceremonial halls. Certain plots were even blessed with incense and chants before planting. This wasn't just soil, it was scripture. Historians still argue over how widespread these practices were: devout fringe or state-sponsored agriculture. But everyone agrees where you plant matters. The scribe leads you to a platform at the edge of the garden. He points to a bundle of sticks and cords, each dyed a different color. This is our record, he says. It's a quipu, or something similar, used across ancient cultures as a counting and storytelling device. Here it tracks seeds, harvest rainfall, moon phases, and even which priest was cranky on planting day. You hold one up. Each knot is deliberate, each string a layer of meaning. And suddenly you see the chinampa again, not as mud and green, but as text. A manuscript of earth, written with roots. Read with patience. As dusk deepens, the workers stop. They bow toward the setting sun and leave in silence. You ask the scribe if the garden will grow faster this way. He chuckles. Not faster, just clearer. You walk the rows one last time. The layout is hypnotic. You feel calmer, more centered. You place your foot down between 2 maize stalks and exhale. Your heartbeat slows. It's like stepping into a living mandala. As you leave, the scribe presses something into your palm, a folded square of bark paper. On it, a grid of dots and lines. Use it, he says. Even window herbs can pray. Back in the canoe, you unfold the paper again and again, trying to decode its meaning. And maybe that's the point. Because in this world, how something grows is as sacred as what it becomes. You think it's going to be another quiet paddle through twilight? Your mind's still swirling with seed patterns and symbolic planting. But the universe has other plans. A splash to your left, a frantic quacking to your right. Then pandemonium. You paddle hard toward the sound and turn a corner just in time to see the most absurd traffic jam imaginable. A flock of ducks, at least 30 strong, waddling furiously down a narrow chinampa causeway like a group of toddlers late for a field trip. Behind them, a small boy with a long stick waves his arms in frustration. Not that way, that's the chili patch, he cries. The ducks predictably ignore him. You beach your canoe and jump out feet, splashing in ankle-deep water. The boy tosses you a bundle of reeds tied together like a mop head. Help me herd them. And just like that, you're herding ducks. Badly, they flap, they quack. One stares at you with visible contempt. They know when you're new, the boy mutters. Mainstream historical fact. Ducks, along with turkeys and dogs, were common in Aztec farming. Ducks were raised not only for meat and eggs, but also as natural pest control. They loved snails, insects, and weed seeds. Some chinampas were even designed around duck movement, using channels and causeways to guide them where they were needed. You and the boy managed to funnel the flock into a canal bordered by maize and amaranth. Instantly, they settle, floating serenely, preening their feathers like nothing happened. They act wild, the boy says, but they always come home. You help him scatter a mix of crushed maize and herbs into the water. The ducks dive happily, tails wagging. He offers you a piece of dried fish as a thank you. You accept without asking questions. He leads you to a small hut near the water's edge where his grandmother is stirring something thick in a clay pot. Duck egg soup, she says, with epazote, good for tired bones and soft hearts. It's rich, earthy, and oddly comforting. She gestures toward the canal. Those birds feed the garden more than you think. And she's right. Their droppings enrich the water. Their foraging reduces pests. Their movements help stir the canals, keeping algae in check. Some farmers even train ducks to swim between rows in narrow irrigation lanes, like living maintenance crews. Quirky tidbit. One chinampa legend tells of a duck who refused to leave a specific bean patch each time it was relocated. It returned by nightfall. Eventually, the farmer gave in, and the next season that patch produced triple the harvest. The duck knew, he said. It always knows. Historians still debate whether this is spiritual metaphor or ancient observational science. Either way, the duck won. You help the boy build a reed gate to keep the ducks from wandering too far overnight. He teaches you the whistle pattern that calls them 3 short, 1 long. When you try it, the ducks mostly ignore you. One bites your sandal. Give it a week, he says, or a decade. Before you leave, the boy hands you a duck feather tied with maize thread. It brings luck, he says, if you don't try too hard. The stars are brighter now, and the water is soft as velvet. You climb into your canoe again, gently pushing off. Behind you, the ducks settle in, forming sleepy circles on the canal surface. Their quiet quacks melt into the hum of the chinampa night. And you realize the ecosystem isn't just engineered, it's relational. People, plants, animals, soil, each tending, nudging, responding to the other. There's no part of this world that isn't watching the rest of it. Even the ducks, especially the ducks. Night deepens. The stars thicken above you, crowded and bright like 1,000 candle flames wobbling on invisible threads. Your paddle barely kisses the water now. You let the boat drift, and then you feel it. A change in the air. It's subtle at first, a shift in temperature, a breeze that brushes your cheek from a different angle. Then all at once, the chinampas seem to tense. The willows rustle more urgently. Ducks flutter awake. Somewhere a dog barks. Your boat bumps gently against the edge of a plot where a man stands with his eyes closed and his face tilted toward the sky. Rain's coming, he says softly. You look up. There's not a cloud in sight. How do you know? He smiles without opening his eyes. I smell it. You're skeptical. Then you inhale, and there it is. The faint scent of wet stone and cracked roots, of something distant yet inevitable. It smells like promise and warning. Mainstream historical fact, chinampa farmers were deeply attuned to their environment. Many claim to predict rain by scent, by bird behavior, even by how soil murmured underfoot. Some could read air pressure changes simply by how smoke curled from a fire. Modern meteorology meet ancestral intuition. The man leads you to a storage hut where tools are being gathered. Reed mats, paddles, clay pots. He gestures to a canal with unusually steep banks. When rain comes, the water will rise. We redirect it there. You join others unrolling bundles of reeds, stacking bricks, and digging shallow trenches between plots. The drainage system isn't improvised, it's engineered. The chinampas aren't afraid of water, they expect it. Nearby, a woman drops a handful of maize seeds into a small fire and listens for the pops. Too loud, she murmurs. The storm is impatient. You don't know what that means, but it makes you nervous. Quirky fact, some chinampa families had personal rituals for sensing weather. One involved wrapping a duck feather around a bean sprout and watching which way it leaned in the wind. Another relied on listening to frogs if they stopped singing. All at once, something big was coming. Historians still debate how accurate these methods were, but farmers swore by them. As the night stretches on, the wind sharpens. Reeds sway. A low rumble rolls over the lake, distant thunder like a god clearing his throat. And yet no one panics. You ask someone if they're worried. He shrugs. It's just water. He points to the rows of elevated planting beds, The clever overflow channels, the thick mats of anchoring willows. The garden drinks, the rest we catch. It's a confidence built on centuries of practice. You help stake the corners of a plot using forked sticks, each tied with strips of bark that flutter like tiny flags. One by one, other chinampas flicker to life with torchlight, each plot activating its own version of preparation. And above it all, the moon watches, half covered now by fast-moving cloud. Someone lights a copal resin burner, and the air fills with fragrant smoke. It's not just practical, it's ceremonial. Every shift in nature is a conversation. Every storm is a guest. We ask for soft rain, one woman says, but we welcome all of it. Later, as the first drops begin to fall, heavy, warm space like thoughts use shelter under a small palm roof beside a storage canoe. The rain is steady now, drumming gently on the water. In the garden, it just accepts it. The beds don't flood. The paths hold. The drainage fills, then settles. Ducks bob through the drops like it's a party. Even the frogs join in singing now in complex rhythms that seem part lullaby, part ledger. The man from earlier stands in the open arms, outstretched, smiling. This, he says, is how we know we're doing it right. You close your eyes, letting the water touch your face. The rain has no anger in it, no violence. It's just the lake remembering. And the chinampas, quiet-rooted, prepared, remember too. The rain has passed. You wake to silence, but not the awkward kind. The kind that's full and rich, like the world has just taken a deep breath and is holding it. Everything smells different now. The canals are slick with reflected sky. The soil breathes mist. Even your paddle makes a softer sound. Your boat glides into a part of the lake you haven't seen before. The chinampas here are older, worn, edges a little uneven, trees a little bent. The willows are wider, gnarled at the base. There are no farmers at work, no children playing, no ducks even. It's too quiet. Then you see them offerings, little bowls of flowers, clay figurines nestled in tree roots, threads tied between branches. The edges of some plots are ringed with white stones, black beans, or ashes. You've entered the realm of the spirits. Your guide says nothing, just raises a finger to his lips and steers the boat slowly, deliberately past a half-submerged shrine. This chinampa, he whispers, belongs to someone who doesn't live anymore. Not ominous at all. He explains gently, some chinampas are left fallow, not by accident, but by design, reserved as resting places or sites of remembrance. The Aztecs didn't believe the dead vanished. They stayed close, especially in places tied to food, family, and ritual. Mainstream historical fact. Aztec beliefs around death were complex and deeply integrated into daily life. Certain plots of land, especially ancestral fields, were considered spiritually potent. Offerings were left for departed loved ones and for deities linked to agriculture like Chicomacotl, goddess of sustenance, or Mictacasuatl, lady of the dead. You tie off the canoe and step lightly onto a plot surrounded by maize left to grow wild stalks, tangled ears, half-picked spider webs connecting the leaves. It's not neglected. It's just paused. In the middle stands a small altar built from stone driftwood and reeds. Around it, feather squash blossoms, cacao husks, a clay flute cracked in two. Your guide kneels. You follow. He pulls a small whistle from his cloak, shaped like a bird painted in faded blue. He blows it once. Nothing happens. Then the wind shifts, a soft rustle behind you. You turn. No one. He smiles faintly. Sometimes they come, sometimes they watch. You don't ask who they are. Instead, you help clean the altar, placing a fresh handful of marigold petals where the wind has scattered them. You don't know the prayer, so you whisper something simple. Thank you, your guide nods. Quirky fact. Some chinampa farmers claim to see their ancestors in the garden row as faint figures bending, weeding, harvesting. Especially at dawn or twilight. It wasn't scary, it was expected. The garden was never empty. Historians still debate whether these stories were spiritual metaphor, inherited trauma, or early cultural grief rituals. But here in this moment, kneeling beside soil, it smells like memory. You start to believe it. Later, you walk the perimeter of the plot. The plants here are odd. Some traditional corn beans, others rare. Medicinal herbs, hallucinogenic flowers, a cluster of mushrooms with dark, waxy caps. These are for dreaming, your guide says, and for remembering. The breeze picks up, the willows sway, and then from across the canal, you hear singing. A single voice, soft, low. A woman's maybe, or very old, or both. You freeze, your guide doesn't. She sings every third night, he says. Never seen her, but she keeps the frogs quiet. You don't ask more. As the stars begin to brighten again above you, place one last offering on the altar, a chili pod harvested yesterday, wrapped in maize leaf. Why that, your guide asks. You shrug, seemed honest. He nods. As you paddle away, you glance back one last time. The shrine is lit now by a single floating torch someone must have placed without you seeing. And above it, drifting like smoke, a heron takes flight. No sound, no splash, just wings and memory. You need a change of pace. After ghost gardens, wind whispers, and altars to unseen singers, it's time for something lighter. Luckily, your guide, now chewing a reed and whistling a tune that sounds suspiciously like a love song, seems to agree. He paddles lazily toward a section of canal, humming with life. Laughter drifts across the water. Lanterns glow gently. Someone is strumming a three-stringed instrument off-key but enthusiastically. You're not approaching a market this time. You're heading for something more personal. This, your guide grins, is where the flirting happens. You raise an eyebrow. On the gardens, he shrugs. Where else you pull up beside a chinampa that looks straight out of a courtship manual, rows of fragrant herbs, neatly groomed flowers, and a sitting area made from woven reeds, surrounded by water lilies in bloom. And at its edge, a young couple sitting just a little too far apart to be just friends, but close enough that every shift in posture speaks volumes. The boy notices you and grins nervously. The girl rolls her eyes. Don't mind us, she says. He's trying to impress me with crayfish. You glance at the boy's lap. Yep, there they are. A small basket of squirming, freshly caught crayfish tied with reeds. Best ones live under the chili beds, he says proudly. Spicy water, spicy flavor. You nod solemnly, the dream of all romantic gestures. Mainstream historical fact. The canals of Tenochtitlan were teeming with aquatic life, fish, frogs, turtles, and yes, crayfish. They were not only dietary staples, but also common gifts in courtship. Sharing food, especially something personally caught or harvested, was a traditional way to show affection or readiness for partnership. The couple invites you to stay. You settle near the edge as the girl pulls out a clay whistle and plays a few playful notes. The boy responds with a splash of water at her foot. She kicks him, gently. You are now third-wheeling in a chinampa date, and somehow it's delightful. Nearby, another pair arrives in a canoe, one steering, while the other recites poetry from a bark paper scroll, dramatically, poorly, passionately. A small floating festival is underway. Not official, not ceremonial. Just young people finding excuses to gather, flirt, snack, and splash each other with water under the stars. There's food, of course, grilled fish tamales, fresh berries, agave candy shaped like maize kernels. A girl offers you one and says, eat this and you'll dream of the person you're meant to marry. You chew slowly. No dream yet. Quirky fact, chinampas weren't just sites of labor and ritual. They were social spaces, especially at night when the heat lifted and the day's work was done. Singing, storytelling, even matchmaking often took place on floating plots or in canoes. One surviving Nahuatl poem even describes the garden where the heart blossoms. Historians still debate how much was spontaneous versus structured social life, but it's clear that in a world of schedules and sacrifice, play still had a place. You sit with the couple as they sort through their crayfish, discarding the smaller ones, saving the fattest for boiling. The girl touches one gently, then tosses it into the water. Too young, she says. The boy smiles. You're not supposed to let them go. She shrugs. Then don't bring them near me. He looks at you. See what I'm dealing with? You grin. You're doing great. As the night deepens, the music gets softer, the torches dim. The canoes begin to drift apart, lovers and friends disappearing back toward their home plots, baskets, empty hands, slightly fuller. You help the boy tie his boat to a post, then hand him a chili from your pocket. Gift for next time. He nods seriously. For flavor or defense? You pause, both. As you paddle away, the girl blows her whistle again, 2 quick notes and 1 long. You don't know what it means, but it feels like goodbye. Or maybe come back. The water glows gently under your canoe. The air smells like crushed, mint-wet wood and something just beginning. And behind you, love blooms between cornrows and crayfish baskets. The next morning is different. It begins with silence, not the comforting, garden-hugging quiet you've grown used to, but the stiff, stifled kind. The birds are late, the canals feel shallower, and the people you pass in canoes aren't humming or waving. They're paddling faster, eyes on the horizon. You don't even need your guide to say it. Something is coming. When you reach the edge of the lake, the cause becomes clear. Far off at the limits of the shimmering water, you spot shapes unfamiliar to this world. Tall ships, wood, sails, steel, men. Too rigid, too sharp, too clean. Conquistadors. They've come again, your guide says, voice low. You've read the history. You know how this ends. But seeing it, knowing what lies on the far side of this peaceful lake, feels like watching an animal wander toward a trap you can't spring shut in time. There's no cannon fire, not yet. But there's a tension in the chinampas now, a stiffness in how people speak, a rechecking of baskets, a muting of music. Still life goes on. You help harvest squash and tomatoes from a half-flooded bed. The farmer beside you is calm, methodical. She doesn't mention the ships, but she double-checks the bindings on her canoe 3 times. We'll plan again tomorrow, she says, more to herself than to you. You paddle with your guide toward a central dock where canoes are gathering. Men with obsidian clubs stand beside priests with painted cloaks. No one speaks loudly. Everyone is watching. Mainstream historical fact. When the Spanish first entered the Valley of Mexico, they were stunned by what they found. Bernal Diaz del Castillo described Tenochtitlan as more marvelous than anything seen in Spain. They called the chinampas a second Venice, though they understood neither the system nor the soul behind it. The empire would fall within years, but in this moment here on the water, it still holds. Someone hands you a folded cloth. Inside maize beans, salt and cacao. Emergency bundle, the woman says. If we run, you thank her. You want to say it won't come to that, but you don't, because it might. Quirky fact, some Chinampa communities sank their own gardens during the conquest, using weighted nets and collapsed structures to prevent Spanish forces from using them for supplies. Others booby-trapped canals or planted misleading crop rows to confuse scouts. Historians still argue over whether these were acts of defiance or desperate survival. Probably both. You help hide a set of ceremonial tools in a hollow tree trunk, incense pots, bone flutes, a small clay figure of Chicomacotl with a missing foot. She'll forgive us, the priest says. A child nearby whispers, but what if she doesn't? You want to comfort her, but you also want to hide. By evening, fires are lit across several plots. Not signals, just resistance cooking. People boil roots, roast ducks, prepare what they can carry. The Chinampas, normally so gentle, feel coiled. Alert, alive in a different way. One woman laughs bitterly as she knots her headband. We'll fight with squash if we have to. You believe her. The stars rise again. The ships are still far off. But closer than yesterday, before you return to your canoe, a young boy presses something into your hand. It's a seed charred at one end, warm in your palm. What is it, you ask? Memory, he says, and then he runs. Back in the boat, your guide says nothing, but he rows faster, not away from the ships, toward the garden. You spend the next morning somewhere between tension and habit. The sun still rises, reluctant but radiant. The Chinampas still gleam their rows, orderly, their canals calm. Birds chirp as if they haven't noticed the sails on the horizon. But the air tastes different, thicker, saltier, charged. You help a group of farmers unload their canoes at a central dock. Not food this time, offerings. Flowers, cacao, dried herbs, obsidian blades wrapped in cloth. It's not a market day. It's a prayer. You follow them through narrow paths to a raised garden surrounded by 4 willow trees, each scarred with tiny glyphs. At the center stands a low stone altar. This, your guide says quietly, is what the Spaniards saw. He means it both literally and symbolically. This ceremonial chinampa is immaculate. Not large, but perfect. Every plant placed with care, every walkway swept. Even the incense burners are aligned like stars in a constellation. It's not flashy, but it feels like something sacred is happening even if no one speaks. Mainstream historical fact. When Hernán Cortés and his men first approached Tenochtitlan in 1519, they were stunned by the city's order, its canals, and its cultivated floating gardens. Spanish accounts describe the chinampas as fields floating on water unlike anything in Europe. One even said it is as if the earth grows from the lake itself. But admiration quickly turned to ambition. And that's what you feel now looking across the water. Admiration and fear sitting awkwardly side by side. You ask one of the farmers if they think the Spanish will destroy the gardens. She pauses, then replies, not on purpose, and that's worse. Because the chinampas don't require explosions to fall. Just neglect, disruption. One wrong canal rerouted, one key willow cut, one patch left unplanted. The fragility beneath the abundance is the part no one talks about. As a small procession forms, you join it silently. Each person places something at the altar, a maize cob, a carving, a pinch of salt. Your guide places a single white flower. You reach into your pouch and pull out the charred seed the boy gave you. You place it carefully on the altar. It wobbles, then settles into a crack in the stone. The priest lights incense. Copal smoke curls upward, sticky and sweet, rising into the morning air like breath held too long. There are no speeches, no wails, just the wind moving through reeds, the steady hum of frogs, the distant creak of a wooden hull that should never have entered this lake. Quirky fact. Some early chroniclers wrote of Spanish soldiers trying to take chinampas apart to understand how they worked, only to cause sinkholes, flooding, or collapse. The system wasn't meant to be picked apart. It only made sense as a whole. Historians still debate how many chinampas were deliberately destroyed and how many simply fell into ruin after conquest redirected labor resources and rituals. But the outcome was the same. A garden that fed thousands began to starve. You leave the ceremony with fingers smelling of copal and dust. Back at the edge of the canal, a boy is retying the bindings on a canoe with obsidian shards fixed to the prow. You glance at your guide, just in case he says. You help carry a load of tools, digging sticks, reed baskets, bundles of dried maize husks to another plot where reinforcements are underway. Not soldiers, gardeners, fixing walls, repairing walkways, checking the roots of the willows. We can't fight them on the lake, one man says, but we can hold the earth. You dig too, quietly, repeating the same rhythm you've learned over the last few days. The same scoops, the same foot placement. Not because it's easy, because it's true. When the sun begins to dip, you climb back into your canoe and glance once more toward the far side of the lake. The sails are closer now. The reflections of foreign armor shimmer on the water. But the chinampas hold. For now, you touch your pocket, the seed is gone, planted maybe, or carried away on the wind. The sails arrived at dawn. No warning horn, no war cry, just the silent, unwelcome drift of foreign wood and steel across the still water. The reflection of the Spanish ships slices the lake like a blade, turning every canal into a mirror of something no one invited. You stand on the edge of a chinampa feat in the damp soil, hands clenched. Around you, people don't run, they anchor. No panic, no screaming, just fast, precise movements. Plants are harvested early. Bundles are hidden, canoes are sunk on purpose. We don't feed strangers. One farmer mutters, stuffing dried beans into a clay pot before burying it under squash vines. You help her pack more obsidian tools, chili bundles, carved figurines, anything sacred or irreplaceable. The first Spaniards appear across the canal. Their armor is polished, their boots are loud, their faces unreadable. They look around and you see the confusion in their eyes. Because this is not what they expected. No gold, no palaces. Just mud and marigolds, just perfection in rows. One of them picks a sunflower. Another sinks knee-deep into a marshy spot and swears. You don't wave, you don't welcome. The villagers watch, unsmiling, unblinking. Then comes the news a group of soldiers has claimed a section of chinampas near the western docks. They've set up camp. They've started pulling up willows. Why, you ask? To build shelters, someone replies. You feel it like a punch to the chest. They don't understand. Pulling a willow isn't just construction, it's sabotage. That tree was holding the soil together. Its roots were the bones of the bed. They'll learn, someone mutters, when it sinks, and it does. Later that afternoon, you paddle past the site. A squad of soldiers is trying to salvage a sunken patch. Their tents are wet. Their cooking fire has collapsed into the canal. One of them is yelling at a basket of ducks. Justice is swift and squawky. Quirky fact, some indigenous farmers sabotage their own chinampas, either by sinking them or rerouting canals to confuse enemy movements. They called it hiding the garden. It was both protest and protection. Historians still argue how widespread this tactic was. But the logic holds: if you can't defend it, you bury it. You return to a central plot where a group of elders has gathered. One of them, a wrinkled man with a voice like bark, holds up a stone marked with red paint. It's time, he says. We choose what they'll never see. You help them bury seed vaults, layers of maize, amaranth beans, even cacao carefully sealed in clay and tucked beneath false rows. They'll find roots in elder chuckles, but nothing to grow. Nearby, children paint fake glyphs on the side of a chinampa, nonsense symbols meant to confuse any who try to decode the planting systems. It's petty. It's brilliant. Your guide joins you as the sun begins to fall. They don't know what to take, he says. You look out at the lake now, dotted with unfamiliar boats and nervous birds. The chinampas still hold barely, but the energy has shifted. A canoe passes you silently. It carries no passengers, only a maize doll seated upright wearing a crown of basil and a necklace of dried squash seeds. You blink. She'll float until someone finds her, your guide says. Or she won't. Later in the dark, you help set reed fences along the most delicate plots, not to keep the Spaniards out, but to keep the memory in. The fences aren't strong, but they're true. Before you sleep, you kneel in the soil and bury one last thing, a carved duck feather tied with maize thread. A child gave it to you days ago. You whisper, "Come back," even though you don't know who you're talking to. Then you lie on your back, staring at the stars, hoping at least they'll stay where they are. The stars have barely faded when you're roused by footsteps, not the soft slap of sandals on chinampa mud, but the clang of armor and the muttered Spanish of men unused to silence. You stay low in your canoe tucked beneath a thicket of reeds. Across the water, a group of Spanish soldiers is struggling to navigate a narrow canal. One pokes at the mud with a spear, another slips and curses loud and metallic. A third waves a map that's already begun to sag from the humidity. They're lost, and this, it turns out, was the plan. Beside you, an elder in a reed cloak whispers, "They have maps, but not memory." He gestures for you to follow. You paddle after him through a winding network of paths, tiny channels barely wider than a canoe, often hidden beneath overhanging plants or disguised with floating mats. The area feels like a garden, but it moves like a maze. "This is the garden's defense," he says. You reach a platform where young warriors in mud-streaked tunics crouch silently with tools, not meant for harvest, obsidian knives, reed spears, and nets tied with bells. Every edge of this chinampa has been modified. The beds are narrower, the walls built high, the pathways blocked with tangled roots. It's not a garden anymore. It's a trap. Mainstream historical fact. During the siege of Tenochtitlan, 1521, Aztec defenders weaponized the chinampa system. They sank canoes to create blockades, turned irrigation ditches into moats, and lured enemy patrols into dead-end canals where warriors waited underwater or behind tall maize. These weren't accidents, they were tactics. You helped string a line of clay pots across a canal, each one filled with crushed chili and lake mud. When cracked, they create blinding clouds. Homemade flashbangs 600 years early. "They don't respect the lake," one of the warriors mutters. "So let the lake teach." Elsewhere, others sink false bridges, covering thin reed mats with mud to lure soldiers into sudden baths. You paddle past one just in time to see a Spanish soldier fall chest deep with a cry, his breastplate sucking into the muck like a poorly chosen anchor. He's pulled out by his comrades, but not before his sword sinks completely. You don't cheer, but someone offers you a roasted duck wing. You accept. Quirky fact. Some chinampa farmers were trained as amphibious scouts, able to hold their breath underwater for over 2 minutes, navigate reed tunnels, blindfolded, and even disappear into water lilies. These techniques were passed orally and considered sacred knowledge. Historians debate how many of these tales were exaggerated, but a few conquistadors reported being attacked by men who rose from the water like reeds themselves. Spine-chilling if true. You help weave floating camouflage mats, sections of garden that appear solid from above, but collapse under weight. They're weighted down with stones and hidden in strategic gaps. "You want to protect a garden," a woman says, tightening a rope, "make it bite back." As dusk falls, you're given a final task to ferry a small clay box across a canal past the patrol lines. Inside are seed samples sacred to a neighboring village. "If they burn our beds," the elder says, "they won't burn what we've hidden." You take the box and paddle low and slow through the reeds under bridges past a slumped soldier asleep in his boat. When you reach the drop point, a young girl waits in silence. She takes the box, places it into a hollow tree, and covers it with basil leaves. Not a word exchanged, just a nod. On the way back, you notice a willow tree burned at the base, its roots still smoldering. You kneel, touch the bark, and smear a bit of ash on your wrist. It smells like pepper and grief. Later at the gathering hut, your guide says softly, "We won't win with fire, but maybe we win with memory." You ask what happens if they destroy everything. He pauses, then smiles, faint and defiant. "Then we plan again." The rain begins with a whisper, soft enough that at first you think it's only the wind teasing the lake's surface. But then the droplets come faster, heavier, steady. You tilt your head to the sky. It isn't a storm, it's a gift. Around you, chinampa farmers stop what they're doing and simply let the rain touch them. No one rushes for cover. No one hides their faces, because they know this is the first good news in days. The Spanish, for all their steel and maps, have no defense against mud. By mid-morning, whole sections of their temporary camps have sunk their bedrolls, soaked their food stores floating. The lake reclaims what was never offered gently. You paddle past a trio of invaders trying to bail out a canoe with their helmets. It's working about as well as you'd expect. But your mood sobers as you turn a corner and see a ravaged garden bed, willow trees cut at the base, maize stalks trampled. Someone tried to turn this plot into a landing space. It didn't work. But it still hurts. You kneel in the waterlogged soil. It's like placing your hand on the chest of a wounded animal. Still warm, still alive, but bleeding. Mainstream historical fact. As Spanish forces advanced during the siege, they not only tore through temples and homes, but also destroyed agricultural infrastructure. Chinampas were often used for temporary bridges or firewood. Their value wasn't recognized and certainly not preserved, and yet farmers rebuilt even during the siege, between raids, between rains. You meet an elder named Yayodel. His name means warrior. He is missing 3 fingers and 1 eye and still digs with a crooked stick. You don't stop planting, he tells you, even if you won't be the one to eat it. Together you replant a strip of beans beside a half-sunken walkway. You pack the soil with care. You chant a small tune he teaches you, part song, part prayer. Quirky fact. Some Aztec songs used in planting were said to entice the seeds to grow. The melodies often mimic the rhythm of rainfall or the cries of frogs. Modern ethnomusicologists have tried to recreate them, but none sound quite like the ones in the old records. Historians still debate whether these were literal instructions or symbolic acts of care. Either way, the gardens responded. As you work, more people join. A child carries a basket of sweet potato slips. A woman brings cuttings from a saved tomato vine. By midday, the ruined plot looks less like a battlefield and more like a beginning. Someone places a maize doll in the center. She's got 1 eye and a crooked smile. Hope doesn't need to be pretty, someone says. Rain trickles off your shoulders. You're drenched, cold, and deeply, strangely peaceful. Because even here, even now, the soil accepts you. In the evening, a canoe drifts by carrying musicians. Yes, musicians. One plays a reed flute. Another shakes a rattle gourd filled with stones. The third sings slowly in a voice that sounds more like earth than air. It's not a celebration. It's a remembrance. They stop at every recovered chinampa and play 3 notes, always the same. The notes don't ask for attention. They give it. They honor what's been lost and what's refusing to be lost. You lie back in your canoe, hands behind your head, and let the sound fill you. For once, there's no tension in the air, just water, music, growth, and you realize that chinampas were never just floating gardens. They were living maps of resistance, of love, of continuance. 1,000 years ago, someone planted a chili pepper here, then someone else, and now you. You're part of that chain now. As long as the seeds keep moving, the story never ends. You wake to smoke, thin, acrid, and close. Your heart lurches. You sit up too fast in your canoe, nearly tipping it. But you're not under attack, not yet. A column of smoke rises from the far side of the lake. Dark and deliberate, a signal. Your guide is already awake, eyes on the plume. They've reached the inner districts, he says quietly. The Spanish are pushing deeper into Tenochtitlan, and the chinampas, beautiful, stubborn, and utterly exposed, are now on borrowed time. You help secure what you can: tools, seed pouches, sacred bundles. Not everything will be saved. The aim now is to choose what survives. Mainstream historical fact. As the Spanish laid siege to the Aztec capital, they cut off supplies by destroying canals and chinampas. Starvation spread faster than fire. But even in these final days, records show that families still returned to dying gardens to rescue crops, gather seeds, and perform rites. This wasn't just gardening, it was grieving. You paddled to an abandoned chinampa, one you passed days ago when it was vibrant with marigold and maize. Now it's soggy and sagging, its walls collapsing. But one tomato vine clings to a stick, red fruit still dangling like defiant lanterns. You harvest 3, then 5 more. Then gently you uproot the vine, wrap its roots in damp cloth, and place it into your boat. It can grow again, and you whisper. Behind you, another smoke pillar rises. Your guide says, "We're out of time." The final hours unfold in motion. Canoes zip back and forth like dragonflies. Children carry baskets bigger than their heads. Elders sit quietly in boats piled with herbs. A priest scatters crushed cacao shells in the water, murmuring a farewell to Chalchutlicue, goddess of lakes. Quirky fact. In some rituals, Aztecs poured cacao into the water as an offering, believing it would sweeten the lake's spirit. It was both symbolic and literal, a way to ask the lake to carry their memories forward. Historians still argue whether this custom was religious, poetic, or practical. Most now agree it was all three. Your canoe is full: seeds, vines, tools, a half-broken flute. You drift past another chinampa, now scorched. One willow still stands. You touch it in passing. "I'm sorry," you murmur. And then comes the sound. Not shouting, not cannon fire. The silence of surrender. You see it in the posture of the people, in the hands that stop moving, in the eyes that stop hoping for rescue. But even here in this pause before collapse, something stirs. At the edge of the water, a young girl stands with one foot in the soil, the other in her canoe. She's holding a bundle of amaranth tied with lakeweed. She doesn't cry, she plants. One hand, two fingers into the damp earth. Push, cover, pat. She plants again. Your guide whispers, "That's how we survive." Not with blades, not with boats, with that. You stay until the final light fades from the sky. You press your palm to the soil, then you paddle away, not fleeing, not hiding, just carrying forward. Because the chinampas were never just a place, they were a promise. And even in the face of fire, you remember seeds don't fear ashes. They wait. The world goes quiet after the fall. No more shouting, no more patrols, no more songs drifting across the lake. Just wind brushing the reeds and the soft slosh of water against half-sunken walls. You paddle through what remains. The chinampas are wounded, some cut in half by careless hands. Others burn their ash, drifting like forgotten prayers. But not gone, not entirely. A squash vine grows along a collapsed fence. A frog nestles in a muddy basin. Somewhere under the water, you see a sunken canoe still tied to its post, its cargo of maize dolls drifting like ghosts. And then you smell it. Copal. You follow the scent to a small, hidden clearing, still green, still intact. Someone has lit incense. A clay vessel burns steadily on a platform of stones, surrounded by tiny offerings, chili seeds, obsidian, flakes of reed flute with a cracked mouthpiece. You don't see the person who made it, but they were here, and they're not the last. Mainstream historical fact. After the fall of Tenochtitlan in 1521, many chinampas were abandoned, but not all. Over time, indigenous farmers, often under Spanish rule, returned. Some were forced to grow different crops. Others secretly preserved old planting patterns, ritual songs. The gardens never fully died, they adapted. You reach a small hut barely standing. Inside is a bundle dried beans, a flute, a folded cloth map. The map shows canals that no longer exist, lines that were erased by time and conquest. But it's a start. Quirky fact, some Chinampa farmers secretly carved messages into their wooden tools glyphs that only made sense when read underwater like submerged poems. These hidden notes were passed on like heirlooms smuggled through generations. Historians still debate how many survive today, but a few have been found. Water-warped, faint, still legible. You sit on a mossy bank and remove the pouch from your belt. Inside the charred seed the boy gave you, now dry and warm again. You dig a shallow hole in the soil, no ceremony, no flute song, just you and the earth. You press the seed in gently, cover it, rest your hand over the spot, and wait. The lake laps at the edges of the Chinampa, not cruel now, just tired. And as the light fades, you don't feel sorrow. You feel continuity. You remember the Chinampas are not just built, they're grown, they're sung into shape, walked into shape, grieved into shape. Every willow, every maize stalk, every floating platform is a kind of poem, a prayer against forgetting. Even if they all fall, someone will remember enough to rebuild. Someone always does. You. Now let it all drift further away. The sails, the shouts, the smoke, even the seeds. They blur softly like dreams fading with the morning fog. You're back in your canoe, drifting gently, silently through the night-kissed canals of memory. The reeds part without resistance. The stars above shimmer in gentle approval. The lake carries you not forward, but inward, deeper into calm. You let your shoulders soften, your breath lengthens, the world slows. The seed is in the ground now. It doesn't ask for light or time or certainty. It only waits patient, full of potential, trusting the soil. So you wait too, and in that waiting peace begins to take root. The chinampas might not be visible tomorrow, but they remain in the hush, in the hum of water against wood, in the stories passed down, and in the quiet promise of a garden that will rise again. One leaf at a time. Sleep well. Sweet dreams.